Well, Jim, there are many topics that have come in this week that apparently are very popular because so many people have sent them in. Let's try to get through a bunch of these. This next one was sent in to CornyDriveThru at gmail.com from Peter Sutherland in Surrey, United Kingdom. Hello, Jim. Hope you are well, with a question
mark.
Hello,
Peter. Hope you are well, too.
But he had a question mark there. Hope you are well?
Well, in that case, I take my statement back and just ask the question. Are you well?
I wondered if you had any thoughts on the announcement during the WWE's Q3 investors call that Netflix and WWE Studios have combined to produce a fly-on-the-wall documentary series following Vince McMahon. Surely, if done properly, this could be the most important documentary series in the history of wrestling. Also, will you be tuning into the show? Kind regards. Once again, it's Peter from Surrey.
So they're not doing a documentary on Vince McMahon as far as a documentary on his life and career. They are doing a documentary series where they follow him around presently, current day.
This email is actually the first I had heard of that. I knew they were doing a documentary series.
Well, which is it? That's what I'm trying to answer. I need to know these things.
I will look into it.
As Vince McMahon used to say to me many times, you can't make a decision in a vacuum. You need to have all the information. So give me the information.
I'm looking right now for the information.
You're looking.
Hold on. Let's see what this has.
Because I'll just jump ahead and say that if it's a documentary series following him around day to day right now, I think morbid curiosity would be the only reason I'd want to I'd even rather watch if they'd have done something like that. Of course, he would have never allowed it, and I would have been hot about it at the time. But if they'd have done something like that just for me 20 or 25 years ago, that would have been some classic video. To follow him around all day, every day back then. Right now, I'm not so sure, not only with the product and the state it's in, but also from the last several times I've seen Vince on television, he doesn't appear to have as much vigor as he used to, and I don't want him to potentially come off less than the otherworldly being that we all came to know, love, and sometimes hate.
I'm not seeing anything about fly on the wall. What I have seen here, WWE President Nick Khan announced a multi-part Vince McMahon documentary has been sold to Netflix with WWE and Bill Simmons as executive producers. The series is one of Netflix's most expensive of the documentary, on the documentary side. No release date was noted.
Okay, well, that sounds like just a regular documentary.
And that means it'll be completely full of shit.
Well, and I was about to say, now I would love to see a documentary on Vince McMahon, but I'm not sure I want to see the documentary on Vince McMahon that the WWE will approve.
Or Bill Simmons. Bill Simmons was behind that Andre the Giant documentary. He was behind that Andre the Giant one, which I know a lot of people really liked it. But again, they had that, what was his name, Shoemaker? They had that kid in there they were pretending was a wrestling historian. He either didn't know what he was talking about, so he started making things up, or was just lying. I think he didn't know what he was talking about, so he's making things up. He's the one who said Andre the Giant, as a heel attraction, went to the different territories, and the top babyface would wrestle him.
Yes, I remember that. And we're all going, when they credit him as being a wrestling historian or wrestling expert or whatever, we're like, who? We've never heard of this name before.
All the wrestling historians were saying, what?
Well, yeah, but Simmons aside, isn't that, I know NFL Films had a degree of autonomy, to present the good and the bad, but still overall NFL Films pretty much glorified the NFL, did it not? I don't.
It did.
So I don't really see how you can look forward to an independent look at Vince McMahon from a wholly owned subsidiary of the company that he owns to look at the life. I'm going to be interested in seeing it, see what they do. You may be interested in seeing it to see what they don't do that you can take apart, because I'm factually minded also. But if they come up with some cool old shit that we might not have seen before, video, things like that, I like to watch stuff like that. And I honestly, will everyone know pretty much if the WWE is doing it, not to take it as gospel truth, because they'll say, Vince's superior business acumen, transformed a smoky bingo parlor wrestling into a major multi-billion-dollar attraction and all that stuff.
He didn't try to put anyone out of business. He just wanted to compete. He didn't ask any wrestlers to no-show and walk out. He wanted everyone to give notice and do things the right way.
He certainly did. Whenever they were leaving the WWF, he wanted them to give notice and do things the right way.
That's the thing. If you were going to do a documentary on Vince, you can't ignore all the negative stuff, and there's so much of it. For any good thing you want to say about him, he did, using predatory business practices, go after every single other wrestling promoter, every wrestling magazine, anyone who was doing business in the world of wrestling. He went after them. I just found in the Norm Kietzer files, Norm Keitzer's correspondence about all this, and how Vince Jr. told him, if you cover any other wrestling promotion except for mine, you can't have any access anymore. We're done doing business with you. And then Norm Kietzer called Vince Sr., who had been his contact for years, and Vince Sr. said, no, don't listen to him, don't listen to him. And it's exactly what happened. So, I mean, you got to talk about all that. You got to talk about him.
And by the way, let's just, you've run across that very quickly. For the younger folks in the audience, Norm Kietzer, Pro Wrestling Enterprises, the Wrestling News Magazine, et cetera, had been doing the arena programs for the WWF, the Philly Spectrum, the Baltimore Civic Center, Madison Square Garden, and, all points around the horn for since at least the late 70s.
No, mid-70s.
Mid-70s, okay.
Mid-70s until 83.
And actually had their own, a wholly WWF version of the Wrestling News Magazine for them to sell in the arenas there, but he didn't want Norman to cover anybody else in the world of wrestling in order to get access to do all the things that he had been doing for his father for so many years.
And by the way, I guess we'll answer this now. I couldn't believe we got questions about this. You made a reference quickly to Mankato, Minnesota.
Yes,
a couple weeks ago. And a bunch of people said, why did you bring that up? That's where Pro Wrestling Enterprises, for the most part, was headquartered. Norman was also in New York and various other places. But it happened to him. Vince McMahon tried to hire Bill Apter, tried to hire George Napolitano. When that didn't go the way he wanted, they were banned from ringside. He brought Jeff Walton in to run his magazine. That didn't last too long. He was not just going after the promoters and the promotions. He wanted to own everything. And the first battle was in 83 against the magazines.
So there you have it.
So that has to be covered. Him messing with Crockett Promotions on pay-per-view. How do you
I have a feeling unless it's a goddamn 18-part documentary of 2-hour episodes apiece, they're not going to cover his war against the wrestling magazines.
Okay, well, what about Black Saturday? Because the previous version WWE put out there in one of their McMahon documentaries, Shane McMahon was saying how Vince did this and the ratings went up and they were doing great and Ted Turner wanted to be a part of it. So we had to get away from there, which is a complete bastardization of the reality, which was the ratings went into the toilet. People wanted Gordon Solie back.
They had more calls and complaints to TBS about taking away their quote-unquote Gordon Solie wrestling than they did about any other programming decision ever made before or since in the history of Turner Network Television.
To the point where Ted Turner brought Bill Watts onto the station, gave him Sunday nights, quickly became the highest-rated show in cable television, put Ole Anderson on Saturday mornings, and, Vince McMahon was about to get kicked off that network until Jim Barnett brokered the deal where Jim Crockett Jr. paid $1 million for the TBS time slot, which ended the talks with Ted Turner and Bill Watts, brought Ole Anderson back into the fold. That funded WrestleMania because Vince was out of money. There was no more money. Between that and the New Japan deal, that funded WrestleMania. So, that in a sense has to be talked about because it's all about Vince gambling on himself and all the usual crap.
They're not going to talk about that.
There's various books right now in production about Vince McMahon and the WWE. And the WWE has a list of people that the people writing the books are not allowed to talk to. And at the top of the list is Dr. D. David Schultz.
I wonder why.
Yeah, that's the point. How do you ignore the Rita Chatterton thing? How do you ignore the 92 scandals? How do you ignore so many different things, which they're about to do? We'll find out very briefly. They're about to do
I'm just saying, the reason why I say they're not going to cover those things is because they're not going to delve And maybe I'm going to be wrong. We shall see. But they're not going to delve that deeply into any wrestling history. They are going to quickly gloss over whatever happened before 1983 and primarily concentrate on what Vince's father had done with the WWF, barely acknowledge that other promotions ever gave them a run for their money or exceeded their business in some places, and then start with what Vince did with his father's small company that was making a fortune and how he built it up into a global sports entertainment juggernaut.
His father's company.
I'm guaranteeing you there will be very little.
Oh, yeah, no, you're right.
History.
I guarantee you're right. I guarantee we're going to have to do a whole show debunking everything that's on there. And it's going to be the whole, he put all of his money down and he bought his dad's company, not his father gave him a sweetheart deal and he paid for the company out of the company's profits because he took over the company in 82 and then he had 1 year to pay off in installments the partners of Capital Wrestling, and he did so out of the profits of this company that was making tens of millions of dollars a year at least.
Well, it was grossing over that. It wasn't making that. Some people say, well, making means profit. It wasn't making a profit of tens of millions, but it was grossing that. It was grossing more than, because it was the Northeast Population Center. So it was always the biggest grossing territory. But yes, you are correct in that he paid for it out of it was already an ongoing business. All he had to do was not cancel anything that was happening, and it was going to pay for itself. And that's not even diminishing what Vince has done since then, because yes, he made a lot of money and he did a lot of things right. Most of it did not involve the wrestling product, but it involved picking the right people to work for him and in the office, as far as the merchandising and the licensing and all the et cetera. He went overboard in recent years with hiring people with not only no knowledge of, no background in wrestling, and probably had never seen it before, to the point where there's sometimes a disconnect between what they actually do and most of the people working in the company. But while, it's classic example of he even said, he sells sizzle, not steak. His wrestling has never been the greatest in the world, but he's made more money at it because he picked the right people in business decisions of who to do these things. And every other promoter, whether it was Jim Crockett keeping his same front office staff in the, the office on Briar Bend Drive and them just being outmanned and it went too fast for them, or whether it was the ludicrous management of Eric Bischoff in the 90s, where he lucked into it and then lost it because he was paying everybody like a drunken sailor and making all those screwy deals, and half the company or half the Turner umbrella didn't want the wrestling company there to begin with, so everybody wasn't pulling the same rope. Or whether it's in modern times, vanity projects by billionaires' kids and hire everybody that he likes personally instead of people that have experience in the things they're supposed to be doing. That's why Vince has, yes, I'm not saying that he didn't ever have Stone Cold Steve Austin and The Rock, but many times over the last 30 years and more now, Vince has won these battles because he was just in business better, not because he had better wrestling. But they will, and part of that is history is written by the victors, and they will continue to misrepresent. This is another example of like a Hulk Hogan book, isn't it? Where the truth is impressive enough. Do you have to lie about shit when you were already the biggest box office attraction at one point in the business? Do you have to tell people that you worked 450 days or 500 days a year because when you were in Japan and the United States at the same time, you'd fly across this was actually in Hulk Hogan's book. He would fly across the international date line from here to Japan so that he would actually work twice in two different countries in the same day. And he worked 500 times a year or whatever. Point is, ignoring the fact that if he flew back the opposite direction, he'd lose the day he just gained. So it doesn't make any sense on the face of it. But the truth should be impressive enough. He won, but they can't even tell it correctly and with accuracy on all sides.
Yeah, they won't. It'll be a big wrong. It'll be
Oh, no.
Wrong. Ted Turner was obsessed with me. He just wanted to put me out of business. Never heard Ted Turner say Vince McMahon's name ever.
He did a couple times on the phone. Hey, Vince, I'm in the wrestling business. I think that's what it's like. It's like Trump being, jealous of Obama and wanting to erase everything he did, because I think it pissed Vince off that bad. I'm in the wrestling business too now.